Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of The Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighbourhood watchmaker, Rob Nuts. Today I am joined by a fellow Brit, Andrew Brabyn of Zero West, independent watch company in the south of England, who's doing very exciting things. Andrew, you've been on the show very briefly before in advance of the Red Bar South East event, and here we are again to give you your full hour to discuss exactly what it is you want to discuss about the brand. Welcome to the virtual studio.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Rob. Really appreciate it. Great to be here.
Great to have you back. And as promised, our listeners deserve a little bit more of a deeper insight into Zero West. So let's start where we started previously, just to give everyone a recap, because it's been a few months now. What were the origins of the brand, and how did you yourself come to watchmaking?
It's an interesting story. I've got a friend, Graham. He's the other half of Zero West. He's my business partner. And he's one of those irritating guys. He's an engineer, ex-military engineer, done a lot of work, black ops, aerospace, that sort of thing. In fact, actually, he's the worst person to meet. He'll tell you a story. It'll be fascinating, and he'll get right to the punchline, almost the really juicy bit. And then, obviously, because he's signed loads of documents, he's not allowed to tell you anymore. But I'd always meet him at Christmas dues. We're both mad into watches. And he'd always talk about wanting to design his own watch, and I never offered to help out because, like I said, he's really irritating. He could build his own house. He's really good, all things like that. And then one year, he didn't come to the Christmas party, and he sent me an email, and he sent me a 3D render of this beautiful watch. And he just put on the email, "What do you think? You know, I've been having a play. I've spent a couple of days designing this. What do you think?" And rather than emailing just back, my background's branding, graphics. I went to art college. I specialized in typography. And I thought, I know what, I'm going to design him a dial, design him a logo, and I put it into his 3D render. And then I turned it into an advert. It was very Breitling-esque. It had a chrome biplane that flew around the 3D render of the watch. And I sent it back to him and I said, your watch looks amazing. It could look like this. With no other thought of, there you go, off you go, sort of thing. And he just emailed back and said, "Do you want to set up a watch brand?" And it was a bit tongue in cheek. And he came over to, I worked for myself at that time. I was freelancing, and I'd spent a lot of time working with customers. I was very fortunate to have a lot of customers that I've worked with, from a very small startup to like a multinational. I'm very grateful. Learned a great deal over the years of working with ad agencies and stuff. And I just thought, it'd be great to have my own product and put all the years of experience that I've learned into my passion of watches. And I knew Graham was massively passionate about watches. So we sat down, and it became instantly clear that what he could bring to the table with all his engineering vendors and his years of aerospace engineering and his love of watches, I couldn't do. And what I could do, like designing a website, designing the dials, the branding and all that sort of thing, he that wasn't his background. And between the two of us, we stood a chance of designing a watch. And so we set off on this kind of immediate road trip, kind of how could we design, what would this watch look like, what would the backstory be, and we soon developed a brand. In fact, I put a proposal to him. It took me forever in the evenings and weekends. My wife nearly left me, and it was like a 30-page document just outlining where the brand could go, the brand ethos, our values, and it really started from there. But obviously we needed a name, and that was another story altogether. So that's really how it kind of came about. It was massively exciting as it is today.
Well, tell us that story about the name then, because it is an interesting name, and I can see that I guess the logo is a couple of integrated Zs and a W made to look like wings, unless I'm just reading too much into it. But to me, that's what it looks like. But where did it come from?
Graham was massively into history and maps, and he spent a lot of time up at Greenwich, and we were talking about names, and he said it would be great if we could connect the brand back to Greenwich in some way. And a big hero of his was Harrison with the H4 clock, and finding longitude at sea. And he said, there's the prime meridian that goes through there. And we were scribbling down some names, and 0 degrees west is the prime meridian. It's where time starts, is where east meets west. And suddenly I was like looking at it, and I was going to go, hold on, Zero West. There's 4 letters from a typographical point of view. There's 2 words. They're 4 letters each. They're a nice in terms of composite. There's no I in there, so negative space when you're doing typography. And then it kind of all slotted in together. We thought, hold on, we want to champion British engineering achievements. Why don't we 0 degrees west, that'd be great. We can put a latitude and longitude and date code on every dial, and that will take you to a moment in time. We can research that moment in time, like the birth of the Spitfire land speed records, and then we can bring the design attributes of that the design attributes of that story to the dial, and the marketing would be, really in depth, and we would put a human element to that, and we would research the whole thing, and so you're not just buying a watch, you're buying into a time, a story, a time and place. And there were so many brands or so many stories out there that are kind of a bit surface for us, and we felt that we could be more true. And this was a really strong branding part of our DNA. So that's kind of where the name came from, and it's served us really well. A lot of people ask us what 0 West means, and as soon as we kind of relay this story with the dial and time and place, you see people nodding in it and connecting the dots, and it's become a really strong part of our DNA, which has been exciting to retail through our individual watches.
What kind of feedback have you received from your customers in regards to the reasons for them buying the watches? Is it mostly product based, or has the story had a huge impact on them and turned their heads towards the brand when they would otherwise not have been turned had it not been for that completely holistic approach to designing the watch and basing it around a time and place as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And it's a question that we ask ourselves constantly as we move forward and expand. We're very hands-on with our customers, so to speak. And we kind of try and, glean a lot of information from everybody that we meet, whether it's remotely because we're predominantly an online brand, or those that come to our design studio. And I think that whilst the story is massively important for the majority of people, what often can be overlooked with our brand is the fact that, Graham's designed a unique watch case, or several unique watch cases that are unique to our brand. And that was massively important to us. I do like a slideshow that I present to art colleges. And recently I was at Westdean Horological Department by invitation of the British Watch and Clock Association to give a talk all on branding and how we started up our watch brand and the unique attributes of it. And this particular subject came up, and it's really interesting that people are looking. When we set up, one of our primary goals was to make the best watch that we could possibly make. And I'm sure an investor would cringe at some of the decisions that we've made, but they're things that are really important to myself and Graham. And we want people, when they've spent a little bit of time with us, to feel that we are a very viable alternative to maybe one of the big Swiss manufacturers. And whilst we don't produce mass market watches, the quality is definitely up there. So first and foremost for us, it was about creating a high quality product, even at the expense of margin. And I'll come on to a great example of that to do with the strap shortly. But the story is an integral part of that. And so the lines are very blurred. A great example of one of the watches that we have is a Lancaster watch that features material in it from Operation Chastise. And this happened, obviously, to bomb the dams, and getting hold of that material was exceptionally difficult. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on that one topic alone. We were very fortunate to acquire the material. But that's just a great example of one of our theme watches that has captured the imagination. And we have people but the other day I had a phone call from somebody, I think they were in Middlesbrough, and the phone tripped through from the studio to my mobile. It was 8:00 at night. And he said, do you have one of these in stock? I know you normally build to order. And I said, actually, we do. We have a couple in the safe. And he said, if I came down early tomorrow morning, could I pick it up? And he was here at like 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what time he got up, but that's just the sort of lengths that people go to. Apparently, he was going away to pick up one of our watches. And we're very fortunate to have that sort of passionate client base, should I say.
And talking of those watches and the design, it certainly is unique. Do you ever find, or maybe feel, if it hasn't manifested yet, that the design is too unique? And what I mean by that is watch customers tend to be relatively conservative in the pieces that they actually put their money behind. And these are not cheap watches. They're good value for the build quality, of course. And you're an independent brand that obviously needs at least some margin to maintain and hopefully grow. But I've noticed with some brands, when they start out, with an ambition to do something very different, they find eventually, often sooner than they'd like, that there's a ceiling to the interest in a product that is so far off the beaten track. Now, by the looks of things are going quite well for you. You have a dedicated client base. I believe you have customers who are repeat customers, which is a great thing for a smaller brand. But do you have any concerns that further down the line, there will come a point where you've exhausted all of your potential customers and you maybe need to do something a little bit more mainstream? Does that ever pop up in conversation?
That's a great question. It's something we talk about. I think what's really important for us is brand identity and not being a Me Too brand. I think I'd rather produce something that was unique to us and sell in small numbers than water that down. And a really, we're on a design process at the moment. Graham is predominantly. He's working on a new watch. He's been working on it for probably on and off for about a year. And we've done a massive amount of research into other watches at that watch size, at that price point, the build quality, the dial construction across a multitude of brands. I mean, we've obsessive, way off obsessive. I mean, it's taken up a massive amount of our time. And what we've learned an awful lot through this whole process, where we have to be really careful, is being influenced by what's gone before, what other brands are doing. Because if we are not careful, we will lose that brand DNA that we've fought so hard to establish. And whilst we are very aware of the commercial aspect of the business and obviously our customer base, it's very important to us that we don't become a Me Too brand. I do this kind of slideshow, as I've mentioned before, and I take the best way to describe it is I take a cheaper brand, 3 watches from different cheap brands or lower price point, let's put it that way, and 3 very high or reasonably high price points. And what I do is I photo retouch the logos and I swap them. So basically the lower price point watches have the expensive brands on, and obviously the higher price points have the lower price point brands. And, there's a mixture of audience people when I'm talking to people, but the main premise of this exercise is to talk about case designs and generic aspects to watches, which definitely has its place within the industry. I totally understand that. It's a massive market. But it's really to highlight the importance of having a unique case design. And a good example that I then roll on to is Panerai. We're big fans of Panerai, the unique case design, the crystals, the dial design. And it was very important when we set up, it was that that's something that we would want to follow. And I think one of our watches which shows that off really well is the bullhead watch that we do. As far as I'm aware, we're the only British brand that make a bullhead. So it's a stopwatch, a chronograph with a cradle, and it's 44 mil, and it is beautifully engineered. It's got an exhibition back, but we're only making 50 of those. So we're not mass market. So, a lot of our customers are looking for a piece of beautifully engineered horology and a unique piece that is really rare. And often our customers are those that have never bought or spent our sort of price point before, or they're customers who have got a Speedy, they've got a Rolex, and they're just looking for something unique that makes them feel special. So that brand identity and not watering that down is a conversation we have constantly. And everything that we design, we go back to those original principles and say, is it still a Zero West? Are those things that we set out from the beginning? And so that's a really good question, Rob, and it's something we're constantly analysing and talking through with everything that we put out.
I really like the slideshow. So it's a really great way to get people to focus on exactly what they're buying rather than maybe who, in terms of a maker whose name has perhaps more appeal than the cases themselves. The key thing for me when it comes to case design, and you mentioned Panerai, it's a great example, is case silhouette. Now, that's a difficult thing to boss or to master or to own in the industry. The idea that your silhouette itself is so noticeable. Your brand can be identified without any case embellishments, any finishes, any colors, any logos, anything whatsoever. Now, Panerai were probably the most visible, maybe not commercially until the latter part of the 20th century, but the most commercial cushion-shaped case of the 20th century, at least the latter part. And they kind of own that shape in the minds of people. The Royal Oak has got a very identifiable shape when you black out everything else, as does the Nautilus, as does perhaps even a Speedmaster, although you could argue that a Speedmaster would lose something because it's just a lyre-lugged case. When you take your case, and I know you've got more than one, but let's say the classic one that has like the sort of riding lugs, as I call them, on either side, and you black out all of the elements and the finishes to the bezel and the steps within the case, you have something that is, I still think, unlike anything else, but you appreciate more then when you look at it without any of the other things that go into making it a Zero S case, how difficult it is to command a silhouette of your own. Do you think that in time you might want to sort of design backwards from your silhouette to not lose the DNA of the watch, obviously, but to create a more bare bones version of your watch? Because a lot of them are quite complex, let's face it. Like if we look at something like the S4 P9 427 1940, the bezel decoration or the recesses drilled into the bezel is something that wouldn't show up on a silhouette, but is very integral to the character of the watch. And in fact, I think the reason why I'm asking this question is because my favorite watch of yours was perhaps one of the simplest you ever made. It's sold out now, but it didn't have any extraneous case embellishments. It was the case middle and those lugs. And I thought, okay, now that's a watch that I can see as a foundational piece within a brand. I don't see any pieces like it in the collection right now, but is it something that you might revisit in the future for those reasons?
Yes, totally. We've actually got that said watch on display in the studio. And only last week we were having a conversation about building a range off that. It's when people come into the studio, they kind of point it out because it's not something that's actually shows on the website, and it was something that we produced early on. Myself and Graham often talk about what makes a Zero West watch a Zero West watch, and a great example of that is the description you've talked about with silhouettes. I've got drawings, some of them are on the wall, or we've got like a mood board, which is all magnetized up, and one of the staple printouts that's on there constantly is the silhouettes of our different case designs, for the very reasons that you've just said. And often we talk about what can we add, or more importantly, what can we take away, but it still be, have the DNA of a Zero West watch. And there are some key elements to do with the lugs. We've got some further lug designs for moving the brand on, and fine tweaks to the case design that will be introduced next year and the year after. As a brand, we're working on a rolling 2-year design process. It's very difficult to say when some of that's actually going to come out. We were working on a rubber strap for a couple of years, and we've also been ongoing with a really cool deployment system, which we've got 3D models of here that we've been fine tweaking, but we're just kind of slotting all that design work in around the every day to day. Occasionally we'll take 3 or 4 days out at a time to concentrate on something that we need to get into prototype stage. So it's all massively exciting, but again, a really good point raised with the DNA of what makes a Zero West watch. And there's definitely some plans to move the brand on in an exciting way over the next 12 to 24 months.
Oh, that's very good to hear. I think taking things away is the real skill of high-level design, and leaving yourself with that purity of vision is always the goal, however difficult it may be. And the temptation to throw the kitchen sink at a design to differentiate it from everything around it is not always the way to go, especially not long-term. Now, you're obviously a man very keyed into the concepts of brand building, and I'm sure, and I can see this really from the products and from the studio itself, you have controlled everything you can control. So occasionally I work with brands in brand development, and I say, look, there's only so much we can do. It doesn't matter how many years experience you have. It doesn't even matter how much money you have, although the more you have, the easier life becomes in many ways. But you can only control what you can control. And the first thing to do, in my opinion, is to make a good product, like to create something people are going to want to wear, create an ambassador on the wrist that turns everyone that buys your products into tireless advocates for your brand. Because marketing, branding, money can get you your first sale, but only the watch can get you the the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth. Now, you've built the good product. You have an incredible studio that I want to talk about a little bit more in a moment. You've done pretty well getting representation out there in the press. I think maybe you could have more visibility in the mainstream media platforms. We'll talk about that as well in a moment. But the one thing you can't control is luck. And every brand, doesn't matter how big or small they are, needs luck. And sometimes that can be finding the right ambassadors, real genuine ambassadors early on, like journalists that see your watch and fall in love with it. Or it can just be hitting the market at the right time. And we've just experienced one of the craziest periods in watchmaking with COVID doing what it did to the secondary market and having a knock-on effect to new brands that were launching their products at that time, selling hand over fist because people were buying everything they could lay their hands on, especially if it was limited. And now we've exited it and we've seen the secondary market collapse. We've seen confidence drop to levels I don't know I've seen it at since 2008, maybe. That's the last time I can remember people being so cagey about what they did with their money in regards to buying watches. Do you feel that you've had luck as a brand, or do you feel like you suffered as a result of bad luck?
Oh, I think we've definitely benefited from luck. I think you have to make some of that or put yourself in the right places for that to happen. We've been really, really fortunate to have been in a few of the right places at the right time. I hate to talk about it in this way because I know it affected so many people, but COVID was good for our brand. I still really struggle to say that, but it was true. A lot of things came out of that, and one of those was the studio, which we'll come on to that. But yeah, it's there's no doubt that the market's a different place now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Things are changing, but we're just aware of that and not naive to the fact that the marketplace is a different landscape. And has that changed what we're doing? Yes and no. It has changed some of when and where we launch things, but the drive is just as high, if not higher than before. And we are basically just trying to ride the fortunate wave of the following that we have and just stay positive and fortunate for the customer base that we have and the new people that we're meeting. But you're quite right. There was a time before where it was a less considered purchase, whereas now I would say it's definitely more of a considered purchase.
You're also in possibly the worst price point to be in right now. And maybe you're not feeling it as much as a lot of brands are. I don't know. You can tell us if you feel like telling us if you are or not. But honestly, between 1,500 and say 6,000, it is an absolute dogfight. And so many of the major brands produce watches within that price bracket, such as Tudor and Omega, Longines, for example. People below that price point, 500 to 1,500, they seem to be having a field day right now. They seem to be the brands that are surviving and thriving post-COVID. Guys above that, 10K, also totally different customer base, totally different volume consideration. They seem to be okay. But right now, I've noticed that 1,500 to 6,000, maybe a little higher, maybe 7,000, that is extremely tough sledding. So have you noticed in the last, let's just say 12 months, a dip in sales or interest that you can attribute to this recent downturn in confidence?
Yes, yes, I can. Well, within the UK, we're fortunate enough that some of our sales, or a high percentage, go to the States. So what we've noticed is the States is growing for us as a market outside the UK, whereas the UK has maybe dipped slightly or stable depending certain times of the year and when we've released a model. It's definitely model related, or when we bring out new models related as a business. We're very attuned to the spikes in marketing, sales, interest, revolves predominantly around new model releases. There's an underlying, new people finding out about the brand who have never heard of us before. That seems to be like a constant. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamics at the moment, and I don't think it's really settled down. I think it's still evolving, and we're obviously intrigued and concerned to see what patterns flow over the next 6 months. But what we put in place are exciting new models to release later next year, and we're just focusing on the here and now, and the being designers, you're so product based rather than sales based. But they've served us well in the past, so we hope to continue on that front.
It is amazing how much the American market is buoying these new independent brands, relatively young brands that would expect maybe to find more favor in their home nations, but finding that the American collectors community is certainly big enough and diverse enough and moneyed enough to take risks on smaller brands and to support new endeavors. It's great to see, although maybe it's not a surprise considering the American economy is actually doing pretty well. We're recording this in early December, although it won't go out until early 2024. And right now, I believe that the American economy is like up 7% this year. It's one of the few booming Western economies at the moment. So whatever people say about Biden, he's certainly done something for the confidence in that economy. So let's talk about your home base. Let's talk about your studio in Emsworth. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. In between Chichester and Portsmouth on the south coast. We're in an old boathouse overlooking the water. It is we're very, very fortunate to have this old building which we work out of. When we took it over, we didn't realise that it had some automotive history. Back in the day, or just after the Second World War, there was a famous panelling expert called George Gray, and a lot of the single-seater cars from Goodwood and surrounding areas would come here to be repaired, and the first van wall single-seater body work was all built here. And also, he was because he was so renowned for his body work, he worked on the Slug, which was the Sunbeam land speed record, also the Campbell's Bluebird and Golden Arrow, and they were all restored in Emsworth because of his notoriety prior to going to Beaulieu, where they're on display today. So we've uncovered a lot of this from people walking past and coming in with boxes of old black and white photos from back in the day. And we've got a really nice history board up in the studio outlining the kind of automotive history that this old building has. But one of the things that makes this building really, really special is what we've done to it over the last couple of years. And during COVID, as I said, we were fortunate enough to sell a volume of watches to customers who said, don't send them out. When we get out of lockdown, we're gonna come down and see you. It'll be like a road trip. And I think the first two people that came down from Manchester. I think it was like 7 hours it took them to get here. And this kind of followed on over the following few months. Across the summer, people would travel. You know, we had an event recently and two brothers came down from Newcastle, picked up a watch, stayed over the night, and then went home the next day. And what happened was the studio was a really nice studio before. It was all kind of white floorboards, white walls, but it didn't need to necessarily represent the website or the brand because nobody really came here. And we thought, what would it look like if the website was bricks and mortar? So during COVID, it even sounds strange to say this today, that nobody could visit it. So we thought we could completely do a number on the studio. And over one Christmas coming up to 3 years ago now, Graham 3D measured out and 3D rendered the whole interior. So you could walk round it, spin it round. We've got these beautiful display cabinets. We've got these amazing tables all made out of roll steel joists. And that was one of our watch customers who made those for us. But I think the pinnacle of what we have in the studio is we've got a Mark 9 Spitfire engine that was downed in northern France. Rob, I've got to tell you this story. This is a great story. And I didn't believe it at first. So we get a phone call from one of our watch customers and he goes, I've got a friend, he's a farmer in the New Forest and he's restoring a Spitfire. Do you want to go and look at it? And I just thought, well, this can't be a proper story, but it'll make for a great tale. So I'll go and see him. And I turn up and there's this farmer at his house. He's got a little Jack Russell. He's wearing Wellingtons. He's wearing like a straw hat that's kind of been eaten on one side. I thought, this just is not real, but hey ho. And he goes, yeah, do you want to see the Spitfire? And I said, yeah. So we walk up this small hill, and on this hill is silhouetted this big barn. And outside it's a Land Rover Defender with one wheel missing. There's a sofa outside with a chicken nesting on it. And I just, in my head, I'm just shaking like, this is not going to pan out how I thought. Lo and behold, he swings open the door. I won't tell you what I said because it's, we're on the air. And there is a full-size Spitfire in there with the wings off. There's a guy in there with all the green overalls, with all the embroidered badges. And they are restoring this Mark 9 Spitfire. And he's got like a a storeroom there with all the dials, spare canopies, the whole lot. And I had to phone Graham, and I said, Graham, you need to get over here. You need to come back tomorrow. And we went there and we took loads of photos, and it's now that Spitfire actually has left there, and it's a Biggin Hill MA764. It's almost finished being restored. It's behind because of COVID. It takes years to restore it, and for it to be airworthy, it has to be finished being restored in an accredited facility. And there was in the corner there was the kind of all these kind of scraps of metal, and I was lifting them off because I was looking for stuff to photograph. And there was an old Merlin engine from the plane. It was in pretty bad shape, but still looked amazing. And I said to him, "Oh, what are you doing with that?" And he goes, "Oh, unfortunately, it was too far gone to restore." And I jokingly said, "Oh, that would look great in our design studio." And he goes, "Well, you can have it for if you want." He said, "It's only going to sit here in the barn." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." But he said, "But you need to pick it up." And at that point, I was like, "Oh, I'd do anything. Yeah, that'd be fine." And then I realised how difficult that was going to be. So the guy that made all our roll steel joist tables has got a big lorry with a crane on the back. And effectively, we had to go to his barn a week later. He and the farmer got his forklift truck and lowered it onto the back of the lorry. And we managed to get it back to the studio, which was the kind of easy bit. And then it took 5 of us. It was on some wheels. We put it onto a trolley. It took 5 of us pretty much the whole day to get it through the door, which we got stuck in the doorway, which was a nightmare. And we'd just done the floor, so we had to board up the whole floor of the studio. And then we had to hire 2 mobile cranes, the sort of cranes you see at a car garage with the chains. And we put a roll steel joist across the table, high up with some chains on with these 2 mobile cranes, and we hoisted it into position. And all the guys were like really excited because we promised them some beers at the local pub, and they were all ready to go. And then I looked at it with Graham, and he looked at me and he raised an eyebrow, and we thought, well, it's not straight. And everyone's going, yeah, it's straight. No, look, it's straight. And we were going, no, we got to live with this. So we spent another hour and a half, much to their disgust, getting it just right. I think the thing is, when you're into watches or you're into design, it's only got to be slightly not straight, and it's something you just can't live with. You'll always notice it, and it will bug you forever. So anyway, we've now got this table, this kind of boardroom table with this Mark 9 Spitfire with this beautiful glass all around it, all lit up with LED lights. And when people come, it's a great centerpiece, and we know the full history of this watch, and it will form a story for one of our watches in the future. And we work with a historical illustrator that's kind of 3D rendered and illustrated the plane as it would have been. And it's exciting to see the plane going to be flying next year. So that's just a great example of one of the many historical things that we've got in our design studio that connects to the watches and everything that we're passionate about. So, we don't have a vast range of watches, and that's never the plan for Zero West. But when people spend the time, often 2 or 3 hours to come and see us, we're not like a normal shop. It's a never an in and out process. And for us, word of mouth and that whole experience is massively important to us. And it's served us well. And maybe that's why so many of our customers are repeat customers.
Well, if passion is what you value above all else in a watch brand, just listen to that story, because I think we can all hear the childlike wonder in your voice of seeing that Spitfire hidden in that barn, guarded by a chicken on a threadbare sofa in the middle of Hampshire. Sounds amazing. To me, I would also be enthralled by such a scene, and what a beautiful centerpiece it is in the studio. And for goodness sake, if you're ever down on the South Coast, then pop along. I mean, maybe let them know you're coming first, but it's a wonderful, wonderful place to go and to see some watches and to really dive into the real history of the brand and its values. It's brilliant stuff. It looks like a stunning space. You've done a wonderful job there. And I mean, if that's one of those things that you can control when it comes to the branding of Zero West, then you've done a stunning job there. But this is maybe a not so much personal, but professionally invasive question. How on earth did you afford such a studio? I mean, where does your investment come from? Is it private money that you and Graham have put into the company? Do you make enough money from the watch sales themselves to support something like this? Or do you have external investment as well?
No, that's again, great question. We funded it ourselves, and we started in 2016. And this is a great story here. So we started in 2016. And the first 3 years were massively exciting, incredible amount of hard work, and threadbare. So, all the money that we invested, there was nothing else coming in. We were spending more and more time as I very quickly did less and less of my own freelance work, and I was spending nearly all my time pretty much for 3 years. And I remember my wife gave me a bit of an ultimatum. Things need to, we need to start selling stuff. And luckily we were at that point. And I had a friend who runs a design agency up in London, and I'd only meet him once a year for a coffee. And we'd meet up every year. And I remember the first year, I was just setting up a watch brand with my friend. Following year, here's some drawings. Third year, some prototypes, some one-offs. And in the fourth year, I remember he said, do you want to bring some watches up so I can have a look? And he wasn't really into watches, but he had been on the journey and he'd heard everything that we'd been going through, which I'll come on to in a minute, some of the real difficulties that we had as a brand. And he bought ROA, he bought two watches, because what we did that was very unusual, I believe it's unusual, is we launched with 6 watches. We launched with a bullhead, we launched with a chronograph, and we launched with several 3-handers, all different stories. And that was a massive, massive amount of work. I mean, looking back, maybe we were being too ambitious, but what was really important for us was that we didn't just launch with one watch, see how it went, brought out different variations of it and grew it that way. We wanted to kind of hit the ground running, as it were, with a brand, be a bona fide brand, because having a lot of experience with branding from and going to art college and everything else that I'd learned, it was really important that if you didn't know about us, not only do you see the quality of the product, but you can see the vision of the brand. And Martin, who obviously bought into that and had experience in that, really enjoyed the journey so much that it really reinforced at early days that we were creating something that people would connect with. And so he bought 2 watches, and within another week he'd bought another 2 watches, which he's a bit smug about because they're all like number ones. We serialize all our watches, and there's always a fight for the first one, number 1, which is always difficult for us to manage when we've got so many good customers. They're all good customers regardless of how many watches they buy, but that's one of our little difficulties in life. It was 3 years, and one of those struggles was with the logo. I remember when we designed a logo, you have to upload that online, and you have to wait 3 months for anybody in industry to object to it. And I remember on the last day of the 3 months, of course, we're like kids, we couldn't wait. We'd already made some stuff with the logo on. We got some sample dials, and we were building prototypes. We were, what could go wrong? And on the last day of the 3 months, the postman turns up and goes, "Can you sign here?" And we're like literally fist pump in the air, kind of going, "Great, it's all signed off, let's go." And I can't say who they are, or it's probably wise that I don't, but somebody significant within the watch industry had objected to our logo. Not on the grounds that it looked identical, but just the shape that it formed was, they deemed it a confusion in the marketplace. And it was a big blow, because it meant that we would have to redesign the logo, and we would have to wait another 3 months. So that's 6 months just to get and that's if it got approved. So we took some advice from some trademark lawyers. I was very fortunate to talk to a trademark lawyer that just got back from holiday, so they were a bit chilled out, and gave me lots of free advice. And we redesigned the logo for the better, and we submitted it. This is the short story, Rob. And we resubmitted it, and we had to wait another 3 months. And on the last day of the 3 months, the same postman turns up. "Can you sign here?" But luckily, it was all good. It was all good. We drank a few beers that night, because the logo was massively important to me personally. It was to Graham, but especially to me personally, because that's really my background and everything. And so for me, it was really important that we had an iconic logo that the brand was built around, and be the foundation for the brand. And like you said at the beginning of the podcast, it is a zero with the reverse wings being Zs that feed into it. So the logo's been really popular. We now do T-shirts and caps, and more from a branding and marketing point of view, which have been hugely popular. So there were lots of even though our respective backgrounds really helped us start the brand, we had massive massive struggles in the early days. And we still have struggles now. The highs are really high and the lows are really low. And sometimes what's really hard is that you're professional. There's a commercial aspect to it. So you'll get a prototype back. 99% of people wouldn't notice the bit that you're not happy with, and it's still viable as a commercial timepiece to put out. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It's just slightly different to what you wanted, and that's what's so hard, because myself and Graham, who micromanage absolutely everything, even the stuff that we source out, find it really difficult to let anything go. Probably to our detriment, but it's just who we are. It's just the things that we value, and we feel that if it's important to us, it's important to the brand, and hopefully the customers that interact with the brand, whether they recognise it or they don't recognise it, there's a worth to that.
Talking of things that you value, you mentioned a couple of times the personal stresses that running your own brand can place on a marriage and on other aspects of your personal life. Could you give us, if you don't mind, a candid breakdown of exactly what it's like? Like, when does your day start? When does it end? You don't live too far from the studio, as I understand, so that's something at least. But what kind of things have you had to sacrifice? Like holidays going out the window, like having to leave family occasions suddenly when there's a crisis at work? Just give us a breakdown, some of those things that you remember that stand out in your mind, and the real conversations that you had with your wife or with your friends or something like that shows us what it's like, what kind of burden it places upon you as a man.
All of the above. I think what's so hard is that you can become. So, a really good example, when we started the brand, or just as we were starting the brand, I called Giles at Schofield. I didn't know him. He's based down in East Sussex, and he was really gracious with his time. Well, I think we spent an hour on the phone, and there were a couple of things that I always indented in my mind. And he said, "Are you sure you kind of want to go on this journey? Because it will become all-consuming, especially if your background is kind of design and you're into detail. It will take over." And he was 100% right. It's an obsession. So basically, my day is I will get into work about 7:30 to 8 o'clock, and I will work through the whole day. Don't take lunch or anything like that. Just walk through, and I work till around 6 o'clock, and then I'll go home. I'll have dinner, and then I'll probably spend between an hour and 2 hours in the evening on the laptop, and that will be either talking to customers, especially if they're from abroad or on a different time zone. It's not unusual to get a phone call and speak to somebody in the States when they work out the time difference. It's massively exciting. There's nothing worse than when you email a brand and you get an auto response that says, "We aim to get back to you in the next 48 hours." People have got a lot of choice out there. I'm a watch enthusiast. I'm really enthusiastic. I love talking about the brand. And if somebody's taken the time to email me, then I'm not going to look at it and say, well, that can wait till tomorrow, or that can wait till Monday if it's Friday night, and I've got the opportunity to reply. I'm not the only one that replies. There's lots of people here that reply to emails. But it unfortunately, when you're living as a watch brand, and Graham's the same, there's the only structure is there's no structure. It's constant. It's 24/7. Like, Graham will email me on a Saturday night about an idea he's got, or we'll speak on a Sunday, or I'll be doing the weekly shop and I'll be putting some stuff on the conveyor belt, and I'll look at some packaging and go, yeah, that'd be great for the straps. If I'm doing a podcast, or I'm doing working with an influencer and they want me on the show, or it's late at night, or it's a weekend, there's exhibitions, there's a lot of short notice. So, for instance, I'll get a phone call or an email, or somebody wants to come to the studio, but they can't get here till they're coming past, or they're staying in the area 7 o'clock at night. Is there any chance you could stay open, or can I bring a friend, or I don't suppose you would do this? And it's like, yeah. If I'm not doing that, doesn't always go down well at home, and you can become very self-centered, and very selfish is probably the right word. But when you're so passionate about it, and you've got other people that are passionate, like when we've built a watch for somebody and you call them up, they're so excited. It's not like you're calling up from a double glazing company to let them know their windows are ready. They will like, we have people taking days off work. It's massively important, and so it's become all consuming. And I'm sure there are areas of my life that's not a good thing, but I don't really know any different, and Graham's the same, and it's the only way that we can be, and it's trying to manage that. It's and you feel that you have to be like that when you've got so many things that you want to do, because not only are you designing the product, you're making that product, and then you're marketing that product, and then you're customer servicing that product. You're kind of doing everything, or you feel responsible for everything, even if other people are working with you to achieve an end goal. And there are things that are massively, massively important to us, and that is the integrity of the company. And that I'd rather somebody went away from the studio and had the best time and didn't buy a watch, because, I would hate to think I would hate for somebody to buy a watch they didn't want to buy or felt they were being sold to. We've all had that experience when you go into a shop and you can feel the sales guy looming in on you. It's just not like that at all here. It's great. I mean, an example was the other day, we had a family that lived locally. They all chipped in to buy their father a 60th birthday present. And she said to me, is there any chance you could kind of open late on a Saturday or maybe a Sunday? And I said, well, look, I live in the next road. She goes, what? I said, what would be your ideal? She goes, Sunday. So I said, look, she told me she wanted a cake. So I said, why don't you bring the cake in on Saturday? I'll put it in the kitchen. Why don't Sunday you walk past, I'll have the blinds drawn, and then you can go for your little walk, like you're going to tell him, and then you knock on the windows, and I'll pull the blinds back, and I'll have all the kind of teacups ready with the cake. And we did that. And, that's not something you advertise that you do, but you're just trying to make something special. And he was like, the dad was like welling up when, we'd already wrapped up the watch for him. And you just do what you do when you can. I'm not saying I could do that every week, but, I appreciate that people have choices out there. And, you just want to make things as special as possible.
Well, there you go. That's how you sell a watch. And you heard it here first. Every other week, not every week, but every other week, of course, Andrew's going to be available for birthday parties and entertainment, get him on the karaoke. What a day to remember that'll be. But you mentioned that you've got other people answering emails for you. How many people work for Zero West these days?
We've got 4 people here full time. It's important to say that there's some really, really important things to mention about what we do that's differently here, possibly to some of the other smaller independent watch brands. First and foremost, we make the leather straps here. Graham, it's really interesting. We tried to find a watch strap maker that would make high quality leather straps to the quality that we wanted in the small quantities that we produce, and that was proving really, really difficult. So Graham said, 2 years into the brand, 3 years, he goes, I'm going to have a go at making a leather strap. And the first one that he made was a bit suspect, but I told him it was the best thing I'd ever seen. Keep going. And it wasn't long, because he's a bit of a perfectionist. We bought loads of tools, workbench, all the leathers, all the hides, and he perfected it down to an art. We've got these beautiful handmade leather straps. Some of them have got recycled World War II canvas in the rally holes, and it allows us to customize. A lot of customers say, "Oh, can you make? I've got a larger wrist or a smaller wrist, or can I have this color thread?" So we do all of that in house, and we've also got we converted in the last 6 months the back of the studio into a workshop. So we've now got a watchmaker here who builds the watches for us. He's Rolex accredited. He's really cool. And it's fantastic to actually be able to, all the parts are made somewhere different. This is an important fact for me to explain, that all the parts we get made, not necessarily in watch facilities, aerospace, all those parts come to us here. We QC them, and then our watchmaker in-house builds those watches. Usually to order, though. We kind of, now that's in-house, we're kind of building some stock up. And that's been really important for us to be able to design everything in-house, make the leather straps in-house, build the watches in-house. And also a couple of years ago, because we were getting such a backlog with the leather straps, we designed a vulcanized rubber strap, and we got a tooling company locally to make those for us. It was great because I could go down and video them all being machined. And then that tooling went to a company in Surrey. It actually does a lot of work for the MOD. and they make our vulcanized rubber straps really high and super comfortable. We've had a lot of customers who wouldn't have necessarily bought a rubber strap who are now converts, and that's been great for the brand. It's definitely helped with us being able to get watches out the door a little bit quicker to customers. But we're very vertically integrated. We design, like I said, all the watches, and we also we do all the website in-house as well, and we also do a lot of the photography in-house. So, and then on top of that, we've got a variety of local freelancers to us that we use for, some of them we use for copywriting, historical research. We've got a local company that does a lot of our engraving. That was quite a long design process or procurement process, because with the engraving, if it's not 100% perfect, it's effectively jewelry. It's not right. So they kind of would cringe at the first intricate designs I used to give them for some watch backs, but they've perfected it down to an art. I mean, for example, a typical watch back will probably take between an hour and a half to 2 hours, laser engraving, and then it's hand polished. And then it has to be hand polished because of the finite detail on it. It's quite an art, but they are real works of art, our watch backs with the engraving, and something that we don't talk about a great deal. There's so much to talk about with our watches that often that gets missed. We just look at them and say, wow, that's really cool. And, we don't often get the chance to go into all the engineering details of the difficulties in doing that. But I'm sure we could do things a lot simpler, but because we micromanage a lot of stuff, we wouldn't feel necessarily comfortable with that.
Well, I do think that they look amazing, and it is something that you could definitely talk about further if you ever desired, if you ever had the bandwidth for it. But those straps, especially the ones with the canvas and the rally holes, are absolutely gorgeous, and it's amazing to hear that you make them on the site. But this leads to my next question: what kind of volume of watches are you actually producing? Because that's quite a burden to produce those straps yourself.
Yeah, it is. I mean, early days, we originally did leather straps for every watch we sold. And that volume, because it was becoming hundreds and hundreds, we're not in the thousands, we're in the hundreds. And that's technically where we want to stay. We're not looking to be the next Christopher Ward or anything like that. That's just not what we're about. Producing small quantities of high quality watches that champion a British engineering achievement, mark an important moment in history, and we make them in really small quantities so that they become collectible. And the leather straps, which we used to produce with all our watches, we now sell them as an upgrade, so to speak, or as an extra strap, because they were really delaying how many watches that we could build or send out. So we sell all our watches now on the high-end vulcanized rubber, and a lot of people love that. And then we have other people who want a vintage leather strap made for their Spitfire watch or their Cafe Racer chronograph. And it's great because it adds that extra layer of individuality to the purchase and customer service and interaction that we have as a brand, that a lot of customers, they never seem in a rush to receive their watch because they don't want the process to end. So there is, as we say, a watch without a story is just a watch. Quite often when you buy something that's so personal to you as that, how you found out about Zero West, that whole interaction and then the whole experience of either being sent it or coming to pick it up is something that people seem to want to repeat. So we're very fortunate to be able to facilitate that, and it's something that's really important to us as a brand.
I do love those rubber straps, and I'm a big fan of rubber straps myself, and I think that they work really well with your cases. There's just something about the way that they flow from the lugs, and I think they look beautifully made. So I can't wait to try a couple of those on my wrist when we see each other on March the 9th at the British Watch and Clockmakers Alliance event in London, where you'll be attending. Before we talk briefly about that event and what people can expect to see from you there, I want to know why you serialize your watches in sequence. I would think maybe for a smaller brand that doesn't communicate exactly how many pieces they make of each or not of every watch, that might hamstring you somewhat. Is there a thought process behind? I mean, I'm sure there's a thought process, but what is the thought process behind that?
Oh, so Rob, so if we produce a model, we will historically do either 50 or 100 of a timepiece, and it's serialized 1 to 100. We do a 0, but that's our model. We always keep one watch for ourselves. We used to keep them out the front, but we now keep them out the back because people would come in and go, oh, I really like that one. And then you'd have to regrettably inform them that was a previous model that sold out. So we have a lot of customers who, so they may not ask for a serial number. So for instance, they may end up with number 27. And if they buy another watch, we always make sure that we speak to them and say, well, you had 27 last time. Would you like another 27? And suddenly this becomes a thing. We have 2 customers that always buy number 13. So before we actually launch a model, we actually have got a spreadsheet with lots of previous customers who have bought certain serial numbers, and they're all kind of marked off as first refusal. It is a difficult thing for the brand. I've seen other brands where I was at an exhibition and I spoke to them about serial numbers, and they were saying, we put on the back of each of our watches, 1 of 500. And it says 1 of 500 on all of the 500 watches, and that's fine. And we thought, that would really help us out. But the serial numbers have become such a thing for us and our customer base. It's not something we're looking to change anytime soon, and it's something that seems to be unknown to us when we started, a thing for some customers. So it's something we're continuing. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, of course, you're right. It is a thing for some customers. Do you really believe, and maybe you have personal experience that proves this irrefutably, but do you think that would be the difference between someone buying a watch and not? Or do you think it just simply adds an extra layer of enjoyment to the process, and that's why you maintain it?
You're right on both accounts. It adds an extra layer. It adds an extra layer of personalization for a customer to know that we've looked out or we've released a watch and we've reserved them a number. If they so choose to take us up on that model, that really helps them connect to the brand and feel part of the journey with the ongoing releases. We have experienced a customer not buying a watch because that serial number had gone. Hardly ever happens. Probably in the years since we started the brand, possibly 3, maybe 4, but really hasn't been, The only downside of doing that is they often get really excited and go, I'm buying this watch with a bonus, or I've been left some money. It would really be significant if you had this number. And you, of course, you want to facilitate that. You can hear the tone in their voice change, and you really want to be. And then you have to regrettably tell them that unfortunately that model is gone. But we kind of wrap that up with but we're only making 100 of these watches. You're I don't mean you're fortunate to have one, but how can I explain? And when we look at what we sell abroad, so you'll take a particular model, and when you look at the percentage that go abroad, I often say to customers, you will be lucky to find somebody who's wearing another Zero S watch, let alone the watch that particular model. It's trying to kind of, I'm not sure people often think about that sometimes, but what pulls a lot of people to our brand is the uniqueness and the rarity and the collectability. They just really enjoy that. We had somebody last week who came to pick up his 7th watch, doesn't live local, lives up north, and 2 years ago he'd never bought a watch in his life. I think he said he had one when he was a kid, and he literally came across us by accident through a friend talking about some salvage material that his friend had put in his kind of man cave. And he came to see us, bought a watch, and then like 5 months later bought another watch, and he comes down and stays over with his wife. He makes a whole night of it. And it's just, very different, very different. Actually, I can tell you a story. I don't want to go off track, but the other day, it was Saturday, and I was halfway through a social media post that had taken me ages to kind of create. And there was an old gentleman at the door, and he must have been, difficult to judge, but nearly 90. And he was hyperventilating, literally hanging onto the door. And I opened the door and I said, "Are you okay? You okay?" And he goes, "Oh, I've just come off my mobility scooter." And I looked out the front, and there was his mobility scooter, and it was all smashed up on one side. And I sat him down, and I made him a cup of tea, and he calmed down, and he was okay. And and he was there for an hour, at least an hour, and he's telling me about World War II, and the stories were fascinating. But it got to a stage where I thought, well, look, you seem okay now. You tell me that your mobility scooter's okay because you managed to get it outside the studio, and I was thinking, I really need to get on. And I said to him, just out of interest, where were you going today? And he goes, "Oh, I was coming to see you." He said, "I did my funeral arrangements last week, and I heard you do Spitfire watches, and I want to leave my son a watch for when I pass away." And I was just like, it was just so off from what we'd been talking about. And I had to get him a magnifying glass because his eyesight wasn't great. And I showed him some of the Spitfire watches. And then he told me that his wallet was outside in the basket on his mobility scooter. And I said, are you sure you want to buy this for your son? And he said, yeah. And he bought it. And I was half expecting his son to come in on the Monday or the Tuesday to say, look, there's been a mistake. And about a week later, his son did come in and thanked us for looking after his dad, and that he'd had this accident. And we chatted for another half an hour, and he would tell me some stories about his dad that it was to do with the war that I didn't know. And there are we have lots of different scenarios like this that for us, it becomes not about the watch. It's about the people that you meet and the stories and the journeys and the experiences and the facilitating as a brand, being able to just give something that people can kind of pass on. And I know it's a cliche thing to say, but we see this a lot. And, there are lots of situations when I look at Graham and he looks at me, and he sometimes we go, it's not about the watches. I mean, it is about the watches, obviously, because we're obsessed with it. But there's just these stories that are kind of circle them, not just the stories of the watches, but the stories of the people that we meet and how they get to meet us, and how it connects people, and like doing the cake for that family. And, hopefully, that was about the watch, but it wasn't about the watch that day. That was about bringing that family together and being able to do something for their dad. And you have some small part in that. And it just makes you feel glad that you've been able to create something to be able to do these small things that maybe make people feel good stuff.
Jesus, I'm nearly tearing up myself. Unbelievable. And I have a heart of stone, so you've done well there. I would love to end the show on that note, but there is one more thing that we do need to address. We touched on it before, and it's, again, about people, about meeting people and bringing people together. And that is this event upcoming on March the 9th. So maybe you could just give us a quick idea of when you're going to be there, what sort of things you're going to be showing, what people can expect, and why they should come along and meet Zero West in person.
Okay, really excited. This is the first show put on by the British Watch and Clock Association on Saturday the 9th of March in London. Massively excited to go to this show. One of the reasons that it's exciting is because we're going to have 3 custom special Zero West watches that will only be available for sale on that day in London. They won't be on the website, just there. And these will be custom specials from existing models in the range, but they will be different, very different, and really, really cool. And we can't wait to show these off. So I'm sure, like a lot of the other brands that are making specials for the show, it's going to have a large draw. I even believe that Roger Smith is doing a watch for the event. So it will be, it doesn't get any better than that. So I imagine the buzz around the show. And if you haven't got your tickets, I believe, they're obviously they're online, obviously, when this gets posted out, but it's going to be a great show. And we're also, we always take great pride in, always go a bit over the top on our stand. And we've got a time machine. That's all I'm going to say. But if you're intrigued now, you'll be super intrigued when you see it. And that's going to be on our stand. And that is really, really, really cool. Been working on it since Easter, really. So, hopefully everyone's as intrigued as we are. But that's going to be on our stand, taking center stage. And we're going to have some really cool... That's the trouble when one of your business partners is an engineer. We get sidetracked on loads of personal projects that we definitely haven't got time for, but they all connect around the brand. And we have some of them here. For instance, we've got like a James Bond briefcase, and we re-engineered all the gadgets from all the different films in a beautiful vintage Samsonite briefcase. People keep bending our arm to sell it, but it's great. We struggle a little bit to take it to shows because obviously it's got a gun in it, but it's all beautifully cut out of the foam. And we've got a rocket here that's a watch winder that's all beautiful stainless steel that all lights up like a Christmas tree, which is great to have on. And hopefully we'll have lots of cool bits like that, which will make our stand well worth a visit.
Brilliant stuff. So follow Andrew's example and don't bring your guns along to the British Watch and Clock Makers Alliance event in March. Definitely not. No guns. If you want to get yourself some tickets for this event, you can go to BritishWatchmakers.com. That's BritishWatchmakers.com. And you can sign up to join the Alliance, which is always a good thing to do. When you do sign up, you get yourself an annual subscription to our watch magazine, which is a good way to stay abreast of all developments in the industry, especially those exciting things happening in Britain. Andrew, thank you very much for your time. We overran slightly because I was just so interested in what you were saying. It's been a great episode. I've really enjoyed it. It's a great insight into the brands. And look, I hope that we work together sometime soon on a project. Also, the Real Time Show is going to be at the event as well, so let's have a chat then. If any of our listeners have questions for Andrew that they want answering, then we can put them to him then. Contact me on Instagram at RobNuds, ROBNUDDS, or my co-host Alan Ben Joseph at ALONBENJOSEPH, or via our dedicated Instagram account at therealtime.show. You can contact Alon or I via email as well, either Rob or Alon at therealtime.show, or via the contact form on the website, www.therealtime.show. We'll be back soon with more top quality watch content. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.